All right. Give it up once again for Dwell Kids. Yes, okay. Thank you for joining us. You can go enjoy some pizza. No kids ministry is complete without pizza. Welcome once again to Dwell Church. My name is Matt Stefan, part of the leadership team here. If you are just joining us, it could be that you want to stay connected with all the comings and goings here at Dwell. You can click that QR code in front of you at some point during this service. We are so excited about next week, our birthday party. We'll have a special gift for each one of you, including some cake. Woo. It's great. Some people love cake. I don't know. They demanded it. They said they're not coming unless there's cake. After that, we'll move into 2 months where we are talking about community and connection here interior to Dwell Church. You cannot thrive as a human being without deep connection and community. In fact, God's plan for you to have abundant life includes community, so we'll be working on that for a couple of months. Karina, one of our leadership team members, will have more to say about that at the end of the service. Here's the part I am now tasked with telling you. I'm going to put on my bad cop hat. We are going to be working together on a digital fast between our birthday and Easter, and you will have to decide partly what that means for you, but we are looking at some research that says people feel the energy expenditure of relationships through their devices without any of the good neurobiology that comes from those. So we put energy out like it's a meaningful relationship, but we get nothing back. So you will have more time and energy to invest in the relationships here at Dwell Church. As we're building those together, we are excited in a different way. I personally know almost everybody that comes to Dwell Church. You're all amazing, and I'm thrilled for you to get to know one another. One of the great gifts God has given to Dwell Church is that great people come to church here. So for those couple of months, there'll be lots of opportunities to connect, powered by all the free time and energy you will have that you will no longer be spending on your devices. And let me tell you what, this is going to be hard for me. I really like to sort of like micro-learn through social media. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm right there with you. I'm sorry that we're going to do that. Today, we are talking about our Dwell Church foundational statements. And the thing that a lot of people wonder is the clicker going to work? People ask me all the time. Yes, here we go. Dwell foundational statements. We've been working on mission, vision, and strategy statements for Dwell. And we did them in what I hope you will see is a broadly participatory way. One of the most important things at the core of Dwell Church is that God speaks to everyone. And so we are discerning what God is calling us to together, and I hope you see that there's a lot of different fingerprints on this. No one person at Dwell Church is like in the driver's seat, making all the decisions, saying what God says. We're doing that together, and that's what kind of process this was. Along the way, I hope you feel how participatory it was. I also hope you feel how it sort of integrates real deeply with our 5 core values. I hope you feel those along the way. But as we talk about our foundational statements, I also have to talk about sort of 2 parts of the Dwell Church origin story. So one of the parts of the Dwell Church origin story, something that I sort of was saying a lot at the beginning, and people asked me, our leadership team asked me to stop saying, which is, I actually don't care if Dwell Church fails. What I do care about is if you spend a season walking in a satisfying way with Jesus. That is my number one concern for you, for the leadership team, for all of us, even for myself. How do I spend a whole season of my life just walking in satisfying ways with Jesus? And one of the things that we thought, just right off the jump, how do we think about a God worth showing up for? The statistics are that 100,000 churches are going to close in the next 5 years. That's nuts. And sometimes there are theories about why that might be, rise in secularity or changes in lifestyle, what have you. I also wonder, observing churches that I've been a part of or that I've been attending over my lifetime, if we fail to talk about God in such a compelling way that it makes it natural to show up week in and week out to church. I wonder if pastors like myself have failed to describe God in a way that makes you think, of course I want to show up for that. So one of our experiments is to try to talk about God in such a way where you say, yes, I would love to do that. If that's real, and I sure hope it is, I would love to spend my life pursuing that guy. And so we'll say this other statement, kind of part of the origin story for Dwell Church. It actually doesn't matter what kind of church we plant. It matters what kind of God we believe in. Is God someone who will meet us in satisfying ways in our deepest desires for him? Let's start imagining what that God might be like, who will meet you when you call upon his name And if we start to imagine God who meets us in satisfying ways, in our deepest desires for him, maybe we are just a little bit closer to imagining him more correctly. So one of the things we have to start doing is imagining God is at least worth showing up for. Now, one of my favorites, Pete Holmes, talks about this. He talked about it on a podcast called The Bible for Everyone with another Peter Enns. It's a great episode. You should listen to the entire conversation. The comedian Pete Holmes, also a very deep, thoughtful believer, put it this way. Imagine you have a coworker. His name is Larry. And he's actually a really great guy. You really like Larry. And one day, Larry checks in on you. Are you doing okay? And you say, actually, Larry, I'm having a hard time in life right now. And then Larry says, oh, I'd actually like to know more about that. Could I take you to lunch? And then he takes you to lunch, and you tell him all of your problems. And Larry says, oh, let me help with some of those. Could I come over to your house and help you some? And you say, you know what? I'm really lucky to have a friend like Larry. Wouldn't you feel great if you had a friend like Larry? And Pete Holmes, the comedian, says, let's at least imagine a God better than Larry. And then Pete Holmes said this, when I enter God's presence, when I'm with God, we should feel spacious. We should feel liberated. We should feel converted. We should feel unburdened. Burden light, yoke easy. We should feel spacious when we interact with God. It should feel expansive and unburdening. Let's start to imagine God like that. And it's so similar to the way that Jesus talked about himself. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What if God truly was who he said he was? The person who meets you in satisfying ways in your deepest desires for him, such that you find him to be gentle and humble in heart, and you feel spacious and unburdened in his presence. If we just start to imagine that God, anything else we do together is going to be a formula for success, because we will be inviting the spacious, unburdening God to dwell amongst us. That is the foundational concept driving Dwell Church. Foundational bit number 2 of the origin story of Dwell. Sometimes people ask me, why a church plant? Why now? What are you doing? Please explain it to me. I field that question a lot. One of the stories where it really started to make sense for me, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, in a previous context, we were running a 3-week program called Exploring Christianity. It was for people who'd never been to church before in their life. And we planned it right after Easter, and so the plan was bring your friend who'd never been to church before in their life on Easter, then sign them up for this thing. And we had 13 people sign up for Exploring Christianity. They'd never been to church before. We were thrilled out of our minds. And we thought it was going to be philosophy talk and complaints about churches that did terrible things and complaints about politics. That's what we planned for. That's what we sort of built it around. How do we help people have those real honest and true conversations? Those things are true and real, right? Let's talk about them. So on the first night, we asked all 13 people, what was your previous experience with church? And all 13 of them said that their experience had been exclusively fantastic. That their experience with church has been really lovely. That the Christians that they knew were people that they trusted and respected. In fact, that's why they were there. That they had a friend where faith seemed to really work for them. And these 13 people were like, I'm willing to try anything if it helps me in my life. And so the post-Christian world is actually a lot more curious about Jesus than we ever give them credit for, right? So I got to walk with these 13 people, 6 of whom I personally know are still attending church 5 years later on a very real journey, discovering what it is like to walk with this God who meets us in satisfying ways in our deepest desire for him. And even then, 5 years ago, I was like, what is the church that is designed to meet these people? What is the church that is a community where those people might come in and say, yes, I would like to keep trying this? A lot of churches do that kind of thing as a hobby or as once a year, or they talk about it as an appendage they've added on later. But I just wondered, even back then, what would it look like for people to build a church where that could happen more often? That was part of it. So we started working on our vision, mission, strategy statements based on this query. How do we build a church where people could go from I don't attend, I've never been to church before in my life, and now I walk closely with the God that makes me feel spacious and unburdened? How do we become that kind of place? And so I started to ask people. We have a few people showing up to Dwell already who maybe that describes their story with some accuracy. So I started to ask friends and mentors and our church plant coaches, how do we start building a series of steps for people to meet Jesus? And they said, here's a few things you can do, but the number one thing you should do is come up with shorthand, helpful ways to talk about your shared life, your mission and vision statement. If everybody knows those, it is so much more contagious. And so we sort of rolled our eyes. Oh, no, not that corporate stuff. Hate that. So we went on a mission. How do we articulate ourselves in such a way that works for us, that speaks to us, that introduces us and draws us near to the spacious, unburdening God? So that's what we're working on. I already told that one. Jesus in the post-Christian world. Here's the process. Oh boy, barely legible. Luckily, I'll read it to you, and I'll send you these slides. Click the QR code to get on our email list if you want to read this later for yourself. Okay, what are foundational statements for? Part of what you'll hear along the way is we want to jettison the words mission, vision, and strategy, especially strategy. But these kind of statements are for organizing, knitting together, and making shareable our shared life. We are sharing something here together. Let's find the right phrase to explain it to someone else. What do you do over there at church? We want to be able to say, gosh, we dwell with the spacious, unburdening God. But they're not going to know what that means, right? So how do we articulate our shared life? Let's define them a little bit further. What do we mean by mission? It's like, why are we here? Why do we exist? What's our vision? What do we mean by that? It's what is the most important thing right now? And strategy, how do we use our limited resources to accomplish what is most important right now? These are useful questions for us. Even if we don't like the words mission, vision, strategy, those are great questions to help organize, galvanize, and move our community along. Now, here are my criticisms of these foundational statements. Sometimes people go into a boardroom, they cook up these statements, and they come out, and then they say them, and people think, that has nothing to do with me or this community. It's a completely inauthentic, aspirational, other kind of thing. So we wanted to build a process that reflects exactly who we are and what we're doing. Another one is they're restrictive. They become this narrow little lane that you're stuck in, but we're like this evolving experiment. So how do we design them in a way that furthers the experiment instead of restricts it? Sometimes they're reductive, especially strategy. You might say our strategy is to use our resources to achieve the objective, right? That feels like a strategic statement. But if you say people are the objective, you've objectified them. So sometimes strategic statements become so reductive, right? That you're just a number, or you're just on a point on a map somewhere. How do we honor, gosh, that we're human beings doing this together in hopefully deeply connected ways? So how do we move beyond those? Ultimately, these criticisms of foundational statements mean they're unhelpful. They don't pass the life test. They don't help us in our personal lives or in our shared lives. So another way of thinking about it is our core values, the 5 things. What Dwell does is built on top of that, and how we talk about it is built on top of what we do. This is a descriptive process. Okay, here was the process itself. One time we were having this conversation. Lisa, Brian, and I sat down and we wrote, I'll show you the picture. We wrote down all the things that Dwell Church does that we all like and have discerned we should be doing and have said yes to. So we're describing the shared life, our community. Then we got with our leadership team and started to articulate it, hammer it out. And then we got with some of our builders. If you're new to Dwell Church, we've jettisoned the word volunteer. And we've started using the word builder. If you're giving time, energy, resources to Dwell Church, you are building something. And what are you building? A place for God to dwell. Who wouldn't want to build that? So if you're volunteering, you are a builder. So then we found our team leading builders. And we invited them to think about these statements with us. This was a participatory process. We changed and tweaked it along the way. Here's where we started this descriptive process. Among my many flaws is penmanship. Sorry. Okay, we thought there are 3 stations along this kind of journey that people go to. The top is neighborhoods, and then Dwell services, and then deeper into the Dwell community, and finally they become builders. And you can see this is sort of a pathway. And we thought, okay, story night. If you haven't been to a story night, they're amazing. That's maybe the best way to invite someone from the neighborhood into Dwell Church. Then at Dwell Church, we want our services to feel participatory. You're doing something. Sometimes they're conversation-based. Sometimes we do community discernment where we think about what is God calling us to learn? What are we going to do for the next 6 months? Well, we pick that together, right? And then you're a part of Dwell community at the bottom. We want emotionally healthy spirituality and what I call second-order fun. First-order fun is like eating candy. It's fun no matter what. Second-order fun is an activity that's actually not fun at all, but it's awesome because you're doing it with amazing people. And starting at 2:30 every Sunday, we are doing second order fun. Setting all this stuff up is not that fun, but because amazing people do it, it becomes really fun. We want everyone to experience something like that. And finally, our builders, we want them to experience a daily interaction with this spacious, unburdening God. We want to help them think about, how do I give an authentic, effective invitation for someone else to walk this stuff? How do I do justice in my life and be of service to the world? That's what we hope happens to our builders. So we took this and we turned it into this. Also not that legible. That's okay. But we reduced all of those things that are actions, participatory services, conversation-based worship, welcome to dwell, which we'll do in a couple of weeks. We put that into one bucket called belong. We want people to feel seen when they come here. And we want a third of what Dwell Church is, in its very most fabric, to be total inclusion for people. We want this to be a church where people can be known and be seen. We want everyone to build Dwell Church. This is what it feels like on the inside. It's like you are interacting with emotionally intelligent people who are dedicated to building what God is up to. And then we want people to become like Jesus out in the world. We'll talk about what that means. But what do you do in the other 6 days? You got a rhythm of daily connection with Jesus. A connection between your faith and your work and family. You're doing justice out in the world and you're inviting others in. This is what we've sort of already said yes to. This is what we've been doing for 52 weeks, because next week's our first birthday. Yay. So then we doubled down on all of this and we put it together. Here they are, these foundational statements we've been working on. Why do we exist? We've been put on this planet to help people dwell in the presence of Jesus. And here's why that statement is so important to us. There are lots of conflicting definitions of the word Christian. Sometimes people say I'm a Christian and they mean I believe the right things. Sometimes people say they're a Christian and they think that means doing the right things. Sometimes people say I'm a Christian and they think I prayed a prayer and one day I'll go to heaven. But we're saying, what does it mean to be a Christian? It means to develop a conversational daily friendship with Jesus himself. We are dwelling in his presence every single day. That might require that you believe some things or do some things. You might also think one day I'm going to go to heaven. That's fantastic. The resurrection of Jesus is the most important thing that happened in human history, but it wasn't this thing that happened a long time ago. Jesus intends for you to walk in daily conversation with his resurrected self, to experience the spacious and unburdening God. So we're on a mission. We put on this planet to do that. What's most important right now for Dwell Church? We're on a quest to build a church where anyone can take a step closer to this Jesus. Here we've got a few words that are doing a lot of work for us. One is the word quest. It feels urgent, feels like this is the most important thing. People, we're on a quest to build a church where anyone can take a step closer to Jesus. The word anyone is carrying an important load here. This is the bucket where we put all of our inclusivity, all of the ways we want to be diverse, all the ways we want people to feel seen and known here. Anyone can take a step closer to Jesus. But also, the word church is doing a lot of hard work in this sentence. Because if you say you go to church, people are going to assume all kinds of things, right? So what do we mean when we say we are on a quest to build a church? What we mean is we are on a quest to build a Jesus-centered, research-based, trauma-informed, diverse, and inclusive church. We don't know what that looks like yet because there aren't many of those around. So we're building something that no one's ever built before, but we're building on those 5 core values, and we're on a quest to do that, where anyone can take a step closer to Jesus. Now here's where we have moved furthest away from the corporate language. From strategy, what is it that we're called? How are we going to do what we're called to do? Instead of strategy, we're deploying the word story. I don't have a strategy for you to get from point A to point B. We don't have a strategy to grow Dwell Church. We have a shared story that we're learning to live together. We're living the story that Jesus invites us into. And the story looks like this. You belong because your story matters. It matters to God. It matters to the person sitting next to you, even if you don't know them. Someday they will discover your stories are intertwined. You belong because your story matters. Everyone builds Dwell Church because everyone has something to give. Amazing people come to Dwell Church. And if you hadn't got a chance yet to start building it, boy, I can't wait till you do, because you're going to meet amazing people building right alongside you. Every one of you has something amazing to give. And we start to become like Jesus. What did Jesus know that he wanted to teach us? It's that the world was saturated with God's presence. What we do in the rest of our life is we start to learn, oh, God really is everywhere. The spacious, unburdening God walks with me in every room that I enter. In fact, he was there before me and has called me to do something in that room. The story that we're living is that we all belong, we're all building, and we're all becoming aware of God's presence out in the world. Now, one of the words that I also think is doing a lot of work here is the word Jesus. We've been put on this planet to help people dwell in the presence of Jesus. Who is this Jesus? What does it mean to be Jesus-centered? And that's where we start, with what Jesus said about himself. One of the ways this conversation developed when we were talking to our builders is the idea that we want anyone to take a step closer to Jesus. And we talked about in what way is it our job to help people take a step closer to Jesus? Now, something in there is about it's less pressure. I don't want you to necessarily immediately convert to Christianity or start to identify as a Jesus follower. What if you just take one step closer to him? In fact, that's what I want for myself. I just want to build a place where I can take one step closer to this Jesus that I have come to know and to love. But really, what right do we have to tell someone else, will you take a step closer to Jesus? And here we started to unpack something that maybe you have experienced that I was calling evangelism trauma. See, as a kid, I was trained, I was told, I was sent out into the world, go tell someone they are going to hell, and the best thing they can do is come to church with me. And I was told that I had to do that. I didn't love them unless I did that. The thing our beliefs do most for us is to shape us, who we are in our internal person. And when we think about the evangelism that maybe you grew up with, that I know I grew up with, there are some assumptions underneath it. One of the assumptions is the world is bad. The world is scary. Everyone is lost, and we have all the answers. Those are the assumptions underneath the pressure to introduce someone to Jesus that I grew up with. And what must it do to you if you walk around with that stuff in your heart, that the world is bad, the world is scary, everyone is lost, and I have all the answers? What kind of person do you become if that is the drum beating in your heart? And so one of the best things that came out of these conversations is that how do we develop a trauma-informed way of talking about sharing Jesus with other people? How do we create a trauma-informed evangelism? And I don't know. But I think it sounds something like this. I have met someone that makes me feel spacious, that makes me feel unburdened. Jesus has helped me. He might be able to help you too. That is the best that we could give somebody, because I only know the inside of my story. I don't know someone else's story. But the best that I can give them is what I have found in my own life, which is that Jesus is exactly who he said he was. And so my greatest aspiration for you in your season at Dwell Church, even if it's just one day, even if it's just one Sunday, my greatest aspiration for you is that you will take one step closer to this Jesus who is gentle and humble, who could make you feel spacious and unburdened. Just take one step closer to him. That will be the shared story that we are living together as long as our season at Dwell Church is happening. Let me pray for you. Oh, Jesus, would you speak to us? God, and would you teach us to speak about what you're doing here at Dwell? And God, would you visit each person in here? Would you help them to feel spacious and unburdened? God, and would you teach us what it means to be on a quest to build a church where anybody could meet you? Lord, we all in our own ways are faced with flaws, inadequacies, unknowns. God, we cannot even hunger for you without your help. Oh, we certainly can't build a church. So would you pour out your Spirit? Would you send your Spirit, Jesus? We love you, Lord. We lift our lives up to you. Amen.